One question, maybe we need to ask ourselves, does the power of prayer and praise, does it work in the kind of battles that I face every day? Does it work in the face of the battles that I face in life? And I think the answer to that is yes. I think that answer is yes, it does. That it works in the big and in the small battles of our lives, just like it did for that nation of Israel in the story that we have here in front of us today. Interesting set of events going on here. Jehoshaphat, king of Judah. Good king. You know, if you look back in chapter 17, it tells us that he walked in the way of his father David, which is good. Because there are a lot of kings that didn't. This one did. Which meant that he had his eyes focused on God. Now, he finds himself in quite an interesting situation here. He finds himself facing a coalition of three armies, of three nations coming against him. The armies of Moab, Ammon, and Edom. This is something that we look at the scripture. If you look at the few verses before this, there's a natural response. He's afraid. He's seeing these huge nations coming against him, gathering three armies together to come and defeat him. Now it's interesting how he responds to that, what he does. He's facing this impossible situation. Yes, he's frightened, but it's interesting as you look through this. He doesn't complain or argue or they don't feel sorry for themselves, but look at his battle plan. Take a look at his battle plan. His response to this huge army that's coming against him. What he does, he calls the nation together. He calls the men, the women, the children. And he calls them to the temple. And how do they prepare for that battle? They come together in prayer and worship. They come together in praise toward God as they begin to face that battle. You know, any time an army gets ready to go into battle, it has to be mobilized. That means you have to get all the troops together, you have to look at your weapons, you have to make sure that everything you're going to use in battle is ready to use, that it's in good working order, that your supply lines are there and set up, that all these details you need to do to mobilize your military and your army to go into a battle. It's interesting, because you look at what Israel's doing here, or what Jehoshaphat's doing with this nation. They form a united front in an all-out mobilization. But the tremendous thing about this is, it's a mobilization not for war. It's a mobilization for worship, for praise, and for prayer. Stop and think about that, what's happening here. I mean, you look at the prayer that he's offering up here. He begins by recognizing all that God has done. You know, God, you've delivered us. You've promised this land. You've delivered us from slavery. You've given us this land. And now he's a little confused. He says, I don't understand. When we came out of Egypt, you said, don't fight against these three countries. Don't battle against them. Leave them alone. And now look at how they repay us. They're gathering their forces to defeat us. I don't understand that. And then there's a beautiful section. I love the way verse 12 is worded in this. He goes through this prayer, and facing this huge battle, this huge army against him, look how he responds. He simply says, we do not know what to do, but our eyes are upon you. When we face the battles in life, where are our eyes? What are we looking at? Psalmist in Psalm 71. You know, Psalmist in 71, that psalmist is just continually talking about the battles he's facing. Talk about having a bad hair day. I mean, it's like he's having a bad hair life. You know, it's awful. He talks about how you know, the hand of the wicked are after him. They're trying to grab him. Every unjust and cruel person is after him. They just want his life. They want his life. You know, they're looking at opportunities to seize him. They're saying, God's not with you. Now's our chance to put him down, to just really destroy him. Now, how do we feel like that when someone's attacking us that violently? How do we feel? How do we respond? Interesting what the psalmist does. And he repeats himself. The first time he says, this is how he responds. With all this going against him, he says, God, my praise is continually to you. And again, in verse 8, he says, my mouth is filled with your praise. And then as this resentment, as this battle builds, look what he says in verse 14. You know what? It's getting worse. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to praise you more and more. I'm just going to increase the uptake on my praise and my worship and my prayer to you. What an interesting way to fight the battles of life. What an interesting way to face those. I mean, look at Paul and Silas in that section we read from Acts. They're going through this town, and there's this girl that has this spirit of divination. And she's following them all over town, chattering away, just chattering away. You know, this goes on for days. Until Paul, he's fed up with this. He says, I've got to quiet this girl down. And so he has a prayer, and he releases her from that spirit. Well, the only thing that did helped her a lot. She was a lot better off, and she was healed from that. But it made her owners hot and mad because they were making money off of this girl. They were making money. Now they had to go out and work for a living. You know, they were mad, so they'd take them in front of the magistrate and say, look at these Jews, what they're doing. I mean, they're doing things that just aren't right in our government here, and they're against Rome and against our nation and against our people. What they're doing is wrong. They need to be punished. And so here's Paul and Silas. They're beaten with rods. I mean, they're beaten with rods. Put yourself in that place. All they did is heal this girl, give her a new way of life, and they're beaten with rods. And then taken off to prison. Not just prison, but it says into the inner prison. Must be a step beyond just the regular prison. I don't know. But this is before prison reform. And so here they are. They're beaten. They're in chains. They're in a prison that many people never came out of alive. Well, golly, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? Let me tell you what they do. About midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God. They were in prayer, and in praise, and in worship, in the battle that they were facing. And look what happened. The doors opened and their chains fell off. The chains fell off. What a story. I like what happened in Numbers chapter 13 when they sent those 12 spies into the land to see what it looked like. And they were getting ready to go into that. They were thinking about going into that land that God promised them. And these 12 spies go in and they look over the land. Wow, you know, this fruit, the produce and everything in this land. It's a rich land, just beautiful fruit and crops and everything you'd want in a land. It's everything God had said it truly is. A land with milk and honey, and they bring all this produce back and show everybody, look at this, it's tremendous. And they say, well, what about going in and taking over the land? And 10 of them say, oh, wait a minute. You know, this is all good stuff. But we looked at the people that live there. They're pretty strong. And these are strong people. They're like giants. These people are like giants. We're like little grasshoppers. I mean, one stomp of their foot and we're bug juice. You know? We can't go in there and do that. These people are huge. And then Caleb and Joshua, two of the spies, went in and they said, wait a minute. What are you talking about? They may be huge, but guess what? This is the land God gave us. Now's the time to go in. Now's the time to do what God told us to do. Now's the time to go in there and defeat these people. Well, they listened to the 10 and not the 2. You know what the difference was? Those 10 looked at the size of the problem. They looked at the size of the battle. The other 2, they looked at the size of God. They looked at the size of God.